First of all, I want to say thank you for having me speak at the National Golf Coaches Association convention this year. It was truly a pleasure and an honor to be able to speak to you guys. I hope it seems like from the feedback I've gotten so far with email follow-ups and phone calls, as though you certainly enjoyed the presentation and want to learn a little bit more. So I had told everyone that I would send out the driving portion of the session in order to delve a little bit deeper. And obviously, feel free to contact me with questions. Here's my phone number, my email, Twitter. I'm going to start with one thing, though, because I do believe that one of the main things we're trying to actually accomplish here is I think we can all agree that we play our home course better than we typically play courses on the road. And so, what I'm trying to do with this shot link data, with this driving strategy, is effectively turn road golf courses, tournament courses, if you will, into your home course as quickly as possible. And let me give you an example of how that works here. When I qualified for the U.S. Mid-Am this year, I had a PGA Tour player caddying for me, and we actually were playing the course blind. I certainly don't recommend that, but it just was what it was. We had to do it. So this is number 12 at Texas Star, where I did my qualifier. And this is a little bit of an uphill dogleg right, where really it's pretty much a blind tee shot. I was able, from my scouting out on Google Earth in advance, I literally just had this printed out in my pocket and was playing the golf course along, and I hit kind of a push flare here on this hole, and it just wasn't the worst golf shot I can hit. We had no idea if it was going to be up or what was going on with the shot, but the guy who was caddying for me said, "What do you think of that one?" And I said, "I got to be honest with you, that's not the worst shot I can hit. That ball should be up by 5 yards." And sure enough, we walk down this hill, we walk up and around the corner, and my ball was sitting right here, up by about 5 yards. And so, knowing that a 65-yard box at 290 is within 95% of my golf shots, really allows you to attack where I know the center of this distribution is right here. So I'm able to just pick a spot on this bunker and know I need to just hammer my cut, hit my golf shot pattern at that spot, and it should probably work out okay. So that's really the foundation of what it is I'm trying to get kids to understand. I shouldn't say kids, but just elite players, is to understand that even the professionals have no idea where it's going. Obviously, I say that half tongue in cheek, but honestly, half serious too. Here is number 9 from TPC River Highlands from this year's first round at the Travelers Championship. And as you can see, the shot pattern, I mean, it's pretty dang big. Again, here's Bubba Watson way up here, and here's Mike Weir way back here. These guys managed to shoot under par with a relatively large shot pattern. And I think that that's one of the most important things that your kids have to understand in order to commit to proper strategy and manage their emotions throughout this game. You aren't hitting a sniper's rifle. You are hitting that shotgun pattern that I talk about. That is certainly what this looks like, as well as this par 3 right here. And yet these guys managed to shoot under par. So I really think that this is the main place that I would start with your players, with helping them understand proper strategy, emotional control, and commitment to proper strategy. So again, here is the driving pattern of a PGA Tour player. This ball at 300 yards is 31 yards left. This ball over here is 36 yards right. That is 67 yards between the furthest left and furthest right ball. This tour player told me right after it that this is about as good as he can hit a driver, which I do agree with, because this centering of the pattern is insane. If he sent me 100 balls instead of just 30, this would have filled in over here. This would have filled in over here. It would have been more of a normal distribution this way. But the reality is we still have 67 yards across this shot pattern. Something I never would have thought of until I analyzed all these courses on a weekly basis for the tour players in 2015 is that golf courses are designed completely formulaic. I mean, yes, aesthetically they look different, but I'm telling you, you just see the same thing over and over and over again, which is why after I had done a few of these golf courses, I quickly realized that for teaching in the seminar, that I could just boil this down into some rules of thumb. I initially was actually trying to teach these kids how to do all this math, which it wasn't going very smooth. And then after analyzing 20 or 30 golf courses, I quickly realized, oh my gosh, I can just boil this down to some rules of thumb. That's that flow chart that I'll get to here in a little bit. But we start with the reality of driving patterns right here. Bam. Now let's move into looking at an actual golf hole. This is a par 5 here in Dallas at Brook Hollow. And as you can see, I've superimposed a tennis court here with Photoshop just for perspective. Tennis courts are 26 yards wide. We have 40 yards from canopy to canopy. But I know, because of Mark Brody's strokes gained statistics, what it would take on average to hole out from all these different spots. So when I actually then take the tee shots and I overlay them into the hole. That's why I put these little dots on them so you can see where every single golf shot is once I remove the TrackMan template. And you can imagine I can just do a pretty basic math problem, kind of like that poker problem I discussed, pretty basic expectation problem, and tell you if you hit driver, this is what your expected score will be. If you hit 3-wood, this is what your expected score will be. Shoot, I mean, all the way on back to 2-iron. If you want to hit 2-iron off this tee and really take the trouble out of play, I can tell you what your expected score would be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to boil this thing down into some rules of thumb, and then I'm going to show you the flowchart, the decision tree that we had discussed. So another thing that this is that video where David Duval says that as a right-handed player, he likes to eliminate the left side of the course because he cuts it. That's not the way that it works. You do not eliminate one side of the, well, you do eliminate one side of the course. You eliminate the side of the course that the hazard's on, which obviously changes from hole to hole. You can see that that's what the best strokes gain driving players do. So here we are with the 10 best strokes gain driving players in the history of the ShotLink era. You can see that they spread their balls from left to right, basically exactly the same. Kenny Perry here is the only one that's heavily weighted left. I'm pretty sure we all know that Kenny Perry plays a larger than standard hook, I should say. So here we are on number 9 at the TPC Four Seasons, the Byron Nelson. You can see there's a lake on the right. Not a single player hit this ball in the water on the right this time. These guys, they eliminate the side of the golf course that has the hazard on it, period. So the center of the shot pattern, you can imagine if this were just a TrackMan data, would be right in here. That is literally exactly centered over this, over the left edge of this fairway. I think another important point to make then is, let's say that now we've got a par 4 that's 488 yards. This is number 18 at the Houston Open. You can see from the tee shot there's just nowhere to bail out left, obviously. Well, if I know that my shot pattern is basically 67 yards wide for the majority of my good golf shots, I'm in trouble if all of a sudden I've only got, as this shows, 100 feet, 33 yards from that hazard all the way over to that bunker. The only way to eliminate that bunker is by hitting it 33 yards right of center. So in this situation, that puts us basically aiming our golf shot right into this left edge of the bunker. But again, what the kids have to really understand is that you have a left part of your distribution and you have a right part of your distribution. You don't simply hit it exactly where you're pointing very often. And so in this situation where you might hit 55% of the fairways if you aim at the dead center of the fairway, by shifting it all the way over here, you actually still hit about 40-42% of your fairways. You're not really giving up that much because of the way distribution works of your driver. Again, assuming you're doing it correctly. I wouldn't tell you to go back from driver to 3-wood because 3-wood, you still are going to get balls into this bunker. Coach Pizzino told me that he saw quite a few guys whenever I said you don't hit your 3-wood any straighter than your driver, that he saw quite a few people kind of raise their brow at that. I certainly could have clarified that better than what I did. I was not trying to say that you actually don't hit it straighter. You do, but the only reason you actually hit it straighter is because it goes shorter. Typically, 90+% of golfers actually hit their driver and 3-wood just about the exact same amount offline in degrees. Now, the driver gets into more trouble simply because it goes 40 yards further. So obviously, if you can imagine taking your 3-wood where it finishes and just going 40 yards out on the exact same line, yes, that's not as accurate. I fully get that, and I probably obviously could have explained that better. So anyways, this situation, I wouldn't tell you to go back to 3-wood though, because all you're doing is making all of your shots 30 or 40 yards longer, and you're not really hitting that many more in the fairway. So lesser of two evils. Sometimes, that's why this hole plays with a 4.4 stroke average at 490 yards. Left is dead. It's a re-tee. So you simply basically cannot ever hit a ball there. That's like having OB effectively lining the edge of the fairway. You must remove that. The only way to remove that is by aiming far enough right that your shot pattern is centered outside of it. Work it less. Jordan Spieth was 8th in total driving on the PGA Tour in 2013, but he was bothered by his statistics when he looked at the numbers after last season. A change in equipment and strategy did the trick. When I looked back, I was trying to work it too much both ways off the tee, said Spieth. The main thing I can tell you is that when you have the ability to work the ball both ways, you have the ability to alter the face path relationship with the driver, the club you're swinging the fastest with the flattest face on the longest end of a stick. It's just a really hard thing to do, and to be perfectly honest, it's just not all that necessary. Yeah, there's times that you're going to come up to a hole that it's just not going to fit your eye. It is what it is. Very rarely is a hole something that you couldn't just play it to the corner and get away with just as good of strategy. So the way that I view it, because I work 100% of my shots as cuts, I literally try to view like this little hurricane track, where if you can imagine going up the left side of the fairway, I've got this furthest left point that I can hit it. This is my hot pull, if you will. So this is number 18 at TPC Sawgrass, obviously. So if I hit this ball where I'm trying to hit a cut, even on this hole, yeah, I may hit one that is a hot pull that is 33 yards left of where I'm aiming. Well, if I'm aiming far enough to the center, or to the right center of the fairway, and I hit that shot, I'm going to be just fine here on roughly 45% of my golf shots. Sure, I'm going to hit a lot of cuts that wind up over here in trouble. Well, you know what? This is a pretty hard hole, and it's not the end of the world. But whenever I personally try to hit draws, and then from the good players that I've spoken to, whenever they try to go against their natural shot shape, it's typically a block cut. So here, not only if I try to draw it into this fairway, my miss is right and going right. That's when you get yourself into some really funky spots. So effectively, what I've done is boil it down to some rules of thumb. So the first rule of thumb, and the kids should hopefully like this: length is the most important thing for tee shots. Think driver first and adjust down. I mean it. I really want you going up there and trying to talk yourself into hitting driver off of every single hole. When we're not going to hit driver, it's because we do not have 65 yards between penalty hazards. Water and OB, OB on both sides, water on both sides. But if you've got 65 yards between penalty hazards and you're a plus handicap, I can pretty much guarantee you're going to keep it within that 95-ish% of the time. If you start actually going back and let's say that you're a 2 or a 3, typically you don't hit it as far, and so really it still works out the same. You still use the same metric. You hit it less accurate, if you will, but you're hitting it shorter. It works out the same. Next up is when there's trouble on both sides of the fairway: lake, sand, trees, OB. Either carrying or being short of one hazard is likely ideal. 40 yards between hazards to challenge them. What I mean by that is so let's say we've got two bunkers on one side and one bunker on the other. If that pinches into less than 40 yards, I don't want you trying to run it between those bunkers. You either need to be able to carry them, or you're going to be laying up short of them. That gets back to this example right here. Excuse me. Right here, where if this is pinching into less than 40 yards, from canopy to canopy right here is 45 yards. But where this pinches in is only 20 yards, I don't want you trying to run a driver through this alley or land a driver. You either need to be able to carry this hazard, or you pretty much need to lay it up short of it. And I'm telling you, good golf course design, they almost always give you an out. The Olympia Fields course, the North course where the USAM was this summer, is one of the few I've ever seen where it's just like, man, there's just no good option. It is one of the hardest driving courses I've ever seen. Obviously, that's why they host major championships at it. But I'm telling you, there's just not a whole lot of good options there. Well, you need to hit driver up there as far as you possibly can and take what you get. Our next rule of thumb is stick to your shot shape on almost all tee shots. Use strategy for dog legs, not shape. That's kind of what we were talking about earlier, man. I'm telling you, you really are going to have a tighter shot pattern if you get really good with the driver specifically at hitting one shot over and over and over again. Everyone likes to say, oh, we don't want to have block practice. We have to have random practice. I'll tell you what, the driver is the only club in all of golf. When you hit it, it will be the exact same shot, or it can be the exact same shot every time. It is teed up, it is on a flat piece of ground, and you can sit there and get really good at doing one thing and one thing only with that golf club. The next one is there is little to be gained by forcing it closer once you have a wedge in your hand. Being closer is better, but do not take excess risk to gain that yardage. I chose that word forcing very carefully because I want you to get it as close as possible in almost all circumstances. Closer is better. But once you have a wedge in your hand, it's just not that big of a deal to get an extra 20 or 30 yards closer if you're taking on excess risk. I say by all means get it as close as you can, but challenging bunkers, challenging lakes, challenging deep rough, that's probably not the biggest or the greatest use of length that you can find. And this last one is just kind of a psychology, emotional point more than anything. Do not think I can't miss it there. Have sound strategy and then simply let the percentages play out. You should miss it everywhere occasionally. I mean, Tiger actually, he hits one of the fewest amounts of golf shots into penalty situations of any of the best strokes gained driving players. And I think that's largely because he's lost all confidence with the driver, doesn't pull it out enough. So he actually, I do believe, does not hit enough balls into the water, into penalties, by playing, I mean, almost for lack of a better word, too conservatively. So his approach shot strategy is almost impeccable, but I do believe he leaves a little bit of value out there with his tee shot. So pick your sound strategy, hit your golf shot, go find the ball, hit it again. Now I'm going to bring in the decision tree that I've told you guys about, and we're going to walk through some examples. Basically, we're applying the rules of thumb to a basic decision tree, and then we're going to use Google Earth in order to help us make proper decisions. So here we are, and we'll go through this entire spreadsheet or this entire decision tree, but we start. Our first question is, are there 65 yards between penalty stroke hazards? I'm going to go first and do all the yes sides. So yes, there are 65 yards. The next question is, does the fairway pinch to less than 40 yards where your driver will either be landing or rolling? And the reason I say your in caps is I do believe that you should have your players hit 50 balls on TrackMan. That should be a pretty good representation of what they're truly capable of. On approach shots, I mean, honestly, once I know your plus handicap, the approach shot strategy is pretty sound, pretty set in stone. With drivers, obviously, you probably have some kids that hit at 280 and probably some kids that have it hit at 330. Different players do need to make different decisions. We still use the same decision tree, but then we need to apply, where is my golf ball going to land? Where is my golf ball going to be rolling if the course is fast? So, are there 65 yards between penalty hazards? Yes. Does the fairway pinch to less than 40 yards where your driver will be landing? Let's just say no. So this is a pretty, for lack of a better word, a wide open hole. Now let's bring in Google. And the way that you want to do this is if you type in the entire word, the entire club that you're looking for with spaces and everything, and hit search, it will usually bring you up a map like this. So here is, as I showed you guys at the presentation, here's now Bentry Country Club. I zoom in. I want to get rid of this. I know where I am. I want to click on the Earth button. That will turn me into a satellite. And my first question that we're trying to answer is, we have 65 yards between penalty hazards, and we do not have a fairway that pinches to 40 where my driver will land. We're going to use me back whenever I'm actually playing decent golf. I carry the driver about 290, 295. And on this hole, here's the back tee box. I'm going to measure distance. I'm going to come out to roughly here. That is 881 feet. That is basically 295 yards right there. I'm going to come across to 881 feet. And I'm going to go back and complete this box. Now I'm going to go show, first of all, hazard to hazard is 195 yards. Basically a little bit more than that because we've got more, 195 feet. That's 65 yards. I'm telling you, you'll see that number constantly. So now when I go back and I complete my box that's what my shot pattern should look like on this hole for probably 95-ish% of my golf shots. And again, how you do that is you right click where you want to start, measure distance. You then go to where you want to go to, and you left click to lay down your first line. You go across to where you want to complete it to, and you left click again, and then you go complete your pattern with another left click. Again, each player should know what their shot pattern is, the width of it, for about 90-95% of their shots. I don't really care about where your worst shots go. We can't do anything strategically to take care of those. We just simply hope that on this particular hole, I don't hit one of my big misses. So, back to the decision tree. There are 65 yards. The fairway does not pinch to less than 40 yards from where my driver land. It's a driver, and it probably seems crazy to a lot of people to fire driver on this hole. But my only other option is to leave it back where I'm actually in the narrowest part of the fairway, or to go back even further than that with like a 3-iron. Well, now I'm just making my second shot 90 yards longer. That will not work out. So it is driver, and it is just over the corner here. Let's go look at a little bit more traditional example of this. Here we are on a par 5, number 16 at my course. We'll go to the back tee box here, right click, measure distance. We go up to this bunker. It is 280, 840 feet is 280 yards to there. If I come across, basically on that line, I've got from penalty hazard to penalty hazard, 245 feet. I've got 80 yards across right there. So, first box, there are 65 yards between penalty stroke hazards. Perfect. Does the fairway pinch to less than 40 yards where your driver will either land or be rolling? No. I mean, yeah, you've got a bunker here that pinches in, but it pinches it down to roughly 45 yards. No problem. Hit driver. This is obviously a little bit more traditional look at what we're talking about. So let's say that we start again. Are there 65 yards between penalty stroke hazards? Yes. Does the fairway pinch to less than 40 yards where your driver will land? So now let's say yes, it does. So this is now a hole that's got a lot of room between penalty hazards, but it does pinch with a bunker or trees. Can you carry a hazard on one side with driver and not get in trouble? If you can, driver slightly away from the hazard that's still in place. So the example for this one is bent trees number 2. So we're going to click on that to close that out. Bent tree number 2, this is 1, here is 2 right here. I use a left click to spin that. So here we go. Here's the back tee box. Here is roughly 290 yards, 300 yards. Hazard to hazard is 100 yards or more. I mean, you're just never going to hit a ball out of bounds on this hole if you play it properly. But let's say that here we go. We've got 850 feet to carry. So the way that I'm doing this, I just do it in my head, but 850 divided by 3 for a yard, that's 283 yards to carry this bunker. I typically do that. That's about my numbers, about 290, 295, like I say. I carry this thing the majority of the time. So, can I carry, does the fairway pinch to 40 yards? Here's 846 feet. So the fairway does, in fact, pinch to only 20, 25, or actually 29 yards. So yeah, this pinches in. I can carry this side. So bam, I carry this side with my driver. Let's say that we had a guy who couldn't carry it that far. Well, his other option is to hit 3-wood back in here. I mean, this tree, with the way that this canopy overhangs, with the way that these bunkers are, I mean, they're still going to get dry or 3-wood into here. They're going to get 3-wood into trouble. You may as well hit driver. I mean, it's really that simple. So, can you carry one side, a hazard on one side with driver and not get in trouble? If that is a no, will 3-wood also get into the pinching hazard? That's what I was just showing you on that one, is yeah, the 3-wood will still get in trouble. It's unlikely you should drop back to a 2-iron or hybrid unless the hole is short and you'll be left with a wedge or less. As a result, you could probably hit driver, since 3-wood doesn't remove the trouble either. That's exactly what I was talking about here. For me, for someone to go back to 3-wood, you still have trouble. You may as well bomb driver and challenge these hazards. That's typically the way it works out. The other one that I used as the example, though, is number 6. It's a little bit more clear-cut example of this. So here's the 6 is a 485-yard par 4. When I right-click, measure distance, come out to about right here is 300. From hazard over to hazard, 220 feet, that's 73 yards. No problem. So my first question, there are 65 yards between penalty stroke hazards. That means it's probably a driver. Does the fairway pinch to less than 40 yards where your driver will either be landing or rolling? Well, in this situation, it does. We have it's 118 feet, and that's right up to where it's actually in. So this is actually about 37 yards across right here. So yes, it does pinch. Can you carry a hazard on one side with driver and not get in trouble? No, there's nothing to carry here. It's just water up the full length of both sides. No. Will 3-wood also get into the pinching hazard? Well, in this situation, yeah, 3-wood can get into either the lake or the trees. So that answer is yes. Yes, it is unlikely you should drop back to 2 iron unless the hole is short and you'll be left with a wedge or less. As a result, you should probably hit driver since 3-wood doesn't remove the trouble either. Okay. Let's look at the exact same scenario, but let's say that no, the 3-wood will not also get into the pinching hazard. That example is for number 11 at Bent Tree. So go over your 7. This is actually right on the other side of the lake of the first hole that we looked at. Right here. So here we go. Right click, measure distance. It's 875 feet, which is basically 290 yards to this bunker. So this is roughly where my driver will be landing. So first question is, are there 65 yards between penalty hazards? Yeah, there's 85. There's plenty of room for driver. The next question, does the fairway pinch to less than 40 yards? Well, this one absolutely does. So if we go right here to that edge of the bunker, to this edge of the water, we're at 109 feet, which is under 40 yards. 40 yards is 120 feet. So yes, it does pinch. Can you carry a hazard on one side with the driver and not get in trouble? Well, this one right here, I cannot carry this bunker. It is 300 to carry. That ain't happening. So no. Will 3-wood also get into the pinching hazard? Well, in this situation, from that back tee box, this pinching bunker is basically 283. That's not really in play from the majority of my throws. The majority of my throws are going to be back here in that 270-ish range. So no, 3-wood will not also get into the pinching hazard. 3-wood is likely correct. There you go. It's a 3-wood. I wouldn't want you hitting 2-iron. 2-iron is going to bring you way back here, that 230-ish range, 240-ish range. All you're doing is making all your golf shots longer, and you're not really. Yeah, there's going to be times you hit the 3-wood in trouble, but overall it shouldn't be that often. So now let's start looking to the no. There are not 65 yards between penalty stroke hazards. So no, it is probably not a driver. That's a pretty good rule of thumb. I mean, I'm telling you, you're just not going to hit. You're going to hit too many balls into the hazards, into the penalty stroke hazards, if it is less than 65 yards. So no, it is probably not a driver. Does 3-wood remove a hazard on one side by staying short of it? If that answer is yes, it is probably a 3-wood, centered approximately 29 to 32 yards away from the in-play hazard, depending on your pattern. If 3-wood removes both hazards, it is centered on the fairway. The example is number 4 at Bent Tree. So let's scroll out. We're going to go over here to number 4 real quick. Scroll back in. So here's a hole where it is about a 440 yard par 4. When I right click, measure distance to this bunker is about 826 feet, which is 275-ish yards. It plays a little bit uphill, so this one I really can't get a 3-wood to, but I also can't carry driver over it. So it's probably not a driver. Does 3-wood remove a hazard on one side by staying short of it? Yes. So here this hole exactly is I can hit 3-wood, and because it pinches to less than 40 yards, I don't really want to challenge this with driver. It's only 23 yards, 27 yards across right here. So I don't really want to hit driver at it because that is too narrow of an area to try to challenge. I can hit 3-wood. I'm typically going to leave it just short of this bunker, and that's going to be the play for me on this particular hole. Let's make an assumption that it's probably not a driver. Does 3-wood remove a hazard on one side of the hole by staying short of it? Let's go with no. These are some of the hardest decisions. Does your next club less than 3-wood remove a hazard? Let's say yes, it does. It is probably that club. You should center your pattern slightly away from bunkers or trees and 25 yards away from the penalty stroke hazards, depending on your shot pattern. So this is an example of number 18 at Bent Tree. So when I come up here, I go out, I zoom out, come back over here to number 18, which is this hole right here. It's a pretty good hole, but when I click back here, I measure distance. Let's go to about 300 yards where my driver goes. So I'm right here at 300. 176 feet. That is not 65 yards, so this one's not a driver. That's first and foremost. I will hit too many balls in the water and out of bounds. The next question is, does a 3-wood remove the hazard on one side? Well, it's only 260 to this end of the fairway. So no, 3-wood does not remove this hazard. I can hit 3-wood into that water for sure. So are there 65 yards between penalty hazards? No. It's probably not a driver. Does 3-wood remove a hazard on one side by staying short of it? No. Does your next club less than 3-wood remove a hazard? Well, yeah, I can hit a hybrid on this hole, or 2-iron, depending on whatever you use, and hit it right here to this corner. Let's call it 240-ish, right there. Perfect. That leaves me a nice shot into the green. 3-wood, if I aim a 3-wood far enough left, I actually wind up challenging these bunkers. These are not a good spot, and I'm telling you, just with the way golf course design is so formulaic, you just see this exact same pattern over and over and over again. It's literally like they're trying to force you to make the right decision. So let's go to what is probably the hardest decision is, are there 65 yards between penalty hazards? No. Does 3-wood remove a hazard? No. Does the next club down from that remove a hazard? No. I jokingly say, where the heck are you playing? But I mean that. This hole is likely very tight and short. Be open to all options aside from driver and make your decision based on the remaining shot. Each possibility will leave you. The example of this one's Firewheel. I don't have a hole like this at my home course, thankfully. But I did play a Tight Lice Tour event one time at this golf course here in Dallas. And this is, I don't even know honestly how far this hole is. Well, let's see real quick. We can right click, measure distance, go to roughly where the tee shot will go up there. It is 1,260 feet. This is a 420 yard hole. Okay. So when I right click where the tee box is, measure distance, and I come out here to about 290, which is roughly where I carry my driver. That is right there. If I go from 290 across hazard to hazard, that is OB to hazard, you'll see that is 61 yards. It's not a driver. It's that simple. OB to hazard, not to mention the fact that this one's really screwy because your tee ball is coming down in these trees, the right portion of it. It's simply not a driver. So, does 3-wood remove a hazard? Well, let's go back and see where 3-wood is roughly. It's right in here at 270. Nope, that doesn't do a whole lot for me. It just gets tighter. Okay, let's go to our next one. Let's go back from there to 240. What does that do for us? Here we are at 240. Well, 240 is the freaking tightest place on the golf course. It is only 50 yards, 45 yards across, hazard to hazard, where your 2-iron would go. Well, this isn't looking very good. And again, these are typically bad holes. Not 65 yards between penalty hazards. 3-wood doesn't remove anything. Next club doesn't remove anything. And like I say, I jokingly say, where the heck are you playing? This hole is likely very tight. Be open to all options. How did I play this hole? Well, when I go back here to where 7-iron goes, 526 feet, roughly 175. That's a 7-iron, which from 7-iron, I am left with roughly 225, 230 to the left side of the screen. I can hit 7-iron, 3-iron, and basically be up and around this green somewhere. I played this hole that week 2 over par, which absolutely destroyed the field by 2 strokes. The average score on this hole was over 5. That is because every time that someone put it in this tree, in this hazard rather, you're now dropping it back here in the trees, or anytime someone put it out of bounds, you're still simply back here. The first round I went walking up there with the 7-iron, the guys were looking at me like I was crazy, and I hit 7-iron, 4-iron just on the left edge of the screen, 2-putted it for par, and they made a 7 and an 8. It was awesome, and like I say, sometimes these are your bad holes. I mean, there's just really no better way to say it, but they're just bad holes typically, and sometimes that happens. Not usually in good golf tournaments, but sometimes it does. So anyways, I hope that this has helped kind of clarify a few of the points that I'd like to make concerning tee shot strategy. Obviously, I'd say contact me with questions. Here's my phone number, my email, and my Twitter handle. I would love to hear from you guys. Obviously, the approach shot strategy, the recovery shot strategy, putting strategy. I'd love to get out and work with you and your team sometime soon. Thank you.